Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Typical Skeptic Podcast. I have another amazing guest with me today. This is the second time he's been on my show. I have with me Michael Kopf. Now, Michael has had amazing experiences. Let me just read his bio so we can get into it a little bit. He had his first paranormal encounter at the age of 2. He's still learning more today about that. He grew up seeing shadow beings, but it goes on where he's a Reiki master. He studied Huna, timeline therapy, tarot cards, gypsy palm reading, astral travel, near death experiences. He has a passion for studying mythologies and cultures. He removed the hex from himself when he was a teenager. But we're going to be getting into a lot of interesting stuff today. He had some really interesting paranormal encounters abroad. In 2012, he was on a cruise in Rome, Florence, and Livorno and Pisa, where he had a couple paranormal experiences. Rome had an impact him on past life level. After the Mediterranean cruise, they took a transatlantic cruise back home to the U.S. When they stopped in Malaga, Spain, he had a very empowering experience. I will get into some of that, and we're going to get into his experiences in Egypt as well. So, well, or wherever you really want to go with it, Michael. It's your hour. But I'd love to hear about your experiences abroad. But thank you for coming on again. How are you?
Doing really well and excited to be back on and excited to see where the conversation goes this time.
Oh, I know. Yeah, honestly, so what happened when you were abroad? I can't remember if we covered this last time. What happened when you were abroad? Maybe we should give the audience some for people that might have not saw you on my show before. Give us a little. I read your bio, but give us a little background about yourself and like how you kind of got into all this.
So I was brought up in the metaphysics, never really got into the religious dogma, and I was blessed to have been able to travel with family, and my work afforded me time to do that. And so I took some trips overseas with some friends and did some tours of areas and had some experiences there. And the reason I don't and call them paranormal investigations is because I didn't start paranormal investigating actually till about 4, maybe 5 years ago. So these all predate that. And so, to be fair to the audience and everyone, I was like, I'm not going to call them investigations because I didn't know anything about investigations at the time. So that's why I call them paranormal experiences.
Yeah, well, that's fair. That's fair. But I mean, if you let me ask you this: if you could take it back and visit those sites again, would you have done more investigating, or were those, and then to backpack that, or big piggyback on that question, did those experiences have a big influence on what you're doing now? Like what you saw in those experiences, is that what made you do what you're doing now?
To be honest, if I was to go back, I would do them all the same because of what the experiences were. And so I feel like if I was to go back and say, France and, take equipment, I may not have seen what I've seen, which would have a different impact on me. And so to get into that, so what happened to me in France was we were going through Cathar region of France. I'm sure your audience is familiar with the Cathars. And we were staying at the foot of Rennes Chateau. Well, a friend and I decided one night we were going to go up to Rennes Chateau at night when everyone is asleep, walk around, just, you're on vacation. It's like it's there. Why not? Well, on the process of walking up there, the first time I could hear stuff rustling in the tree areas. Mind you, there's no animals, there's no people around. And so it's like, and I start getting a feeling, and I say to my friend, we shouldn't be here. And he's like, no, 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 it's okay. We'll be quiet. And so we start walking a little faster. the sounds in the trees starts rustling the same speed we are. And I'm like, these are not thick, like, forest. These are like trees along the side of a road in between like a wall and the road. So I'm like, it's nighttime, but I'm like, I don't see the shade of anything. And so I'm like, something, I finally say to him, something doesn't want us here. We need to turn back. And he goes, all right. So we turn back, go back down, and we go and look at some of the other ruins and sites in the ground. And then the next day, we go do our thing. And then another night, we decide, well, let's try our luck again and go to Rennes Chateau at night. Mind you, it's
And
close
I got
to.
a question before we get into that. You said we were all familiar with the Cathlers. Can you just give us a real brief description of like who the Cathlers were and what about Rennes Chateau? So like the audience has a little bit of a primer. I think that's pretty important.
Sure. So the Cathars were a sect of people who were like the Knights Templars. They believed in sort of an esoteric belief, and they believed that there were certain areas in line from where they were to, I believe it's Sinclair Tower, is what it's called in the UK or Scotland, the famous Knights Templar church area. And each one of these are supposed to be like ascension to the chakras, alignments. And so when you finish this, you were supposed to gain enlightenment. Well, Rennes Chateau is where the Tour Magdala is, and it's believed to be a spot where Sinclair found some wealth, and it's believed to be tied to the Knights Templars. And so there's graves there, but the Tour Magdala is supposedly the most sacred spot there, and it's on the top of a hill or mountain, depending on your definition. And so when we were going up there again, I felt nothing was wrong. We didn't hear any sounds as we're walking up. But then it's like, you know how you get that spider sense where you're like a tingle and you're like, something's up? I
Something's
got
not
that,
right. You get that.
turned around, and it looks like if you saw the movie 13th Warrior, that fireworm, it looked like there was a fireworm coming towards us from the other side of the valley.
Oh my
And
God.
I said to my friend, I looked at him and I said, we need to hurry up. And he goes, yeah, I see that. Mind you, the hills are lit up. It's like, there could be a UFO or a base back there for all we knew. It was like daylight on one side of the mountain, dark on the other where we were. So we're walking up and we notice the fireworm is going in a straight line. Mind you, there's trees. And I start to think to myself, this is not a normal thing. This is not people coming towards us to complain we're up here, because people couldn't be walking through the trees in a straight line. Trees just don't line up that way naturally. And so I'm like a little on edge, and I'm like, okay, we get to the entrance, and I pause, and I'm like, well, I don't hear the rustling in the bushes. So what I call the guardians of the city are like, okay, you guys can come in. So we go in and we go over to the Tour Magdala, and we're looking out and we're like, wow, it's really nice to look at. It's all dark, and it's just, how the night scene is like that beautiful, just peaceful looking. And then there's like, you see the few lights behind certain hills, and it's like, well, maybe that's a town, or I don't think so though, because according to the map they gave us, there's no towns there. So it's like, okay, well, we decide we're gonna turn, walk around the back of the tour, and my friend hears something and goes, "I'll be right back." So I'm like, "Okay, cool, whatever." He's gone. I start walking and look up, and I see a lady in white go like this and just float across right into the tour Magdala.
No
And
way. Wow.
she looks at me, and I'm like, it's like I make eye contact with her. The second she disappears into the tour, my friend walks up behind me, and I said, "Did you see that?" He goes, "See what?" I said, Nothing. I guess it was just my mind." And he goes, "Well, that's okay. Whatever I heard was nothing either." So we start walking back, and at the end of the path, we see a hedge, and in the center of the hedge are two red looking eyes looking right at us. And we both stop and pause, and we're like, okay, that's got to be one of two things. That's either a wild animal, or there's a creature up here that we need to be careful with. And so we start walking slowly, and the eyes are staying still. And look at my friend, and I'm like, "Hey, here's a side path. Let's go through this path." So we go on that path, walk down the mountain back to the room, and never figured out what the two red eyes were, because let's be honest, who wants to go check that out?
Yeah,
Uh,
really. That's scary. That's really scary.
yeah. And the next day we go to a castle. I believe it was Pouvet, and guess what's on the wall on one of their displays explaining the castle?
What's that?
The legend of the lady in white. If you see a lady in white, it's an omen of death. And I sat there and my heart sank, and I was like, okay, I am now marked for death by this statement because I just saw a lady in white last night. Do I tell somebody or do? And so I was like, no, because I don't want somebody getting hurt trying to keep me alive. I don't want that on my conscience. So I stayed quiet about it. And needless to say, I'm still here. So apparently, I met the nice woman in white. But yeah, it was like probably 5, 6 years before I told anybody that I saw a woman in white, because I was afraid if I talked about it, maybe that's what'll activate the mark.
So did anything ever happen after that? Did you feel like the mark was activated on you or anything like that? Or like what do you think happened? Like, or did it just kind of just kind of, you know what I mean?
I think it was just a spirit in white, and I don't think it was one of those that they're referring to, because I never felt, even when I started talking about it, everybody was like, "Really?" And I was like, "Yeah," and never had any weird dreams or never had any ill feelings. And so I was like, maybe the mark didn't take, maybe something in the interaction didn't, like maybe I was supposed to run after her and that's where the mark comes from, or because I just stood there and was nice, she was like, "You know what? We're going to let you alone."
Have you ever had any experiences with like a malevolent spirit, would you say?
I have not actually. I've come across some angry spirits that are like, temperamental, but I have not been to the experience of being bitten or like scratched real deep or hurt. I haven't come across any of those yet.
Yeah. So what do you think the spirit world is like in your mind? Like and what's interesting is it's right around it's right around Halloween time, so it's right around the time for this kind of talk. Like, it's like, have you experienced spirits a lot, like from your paranormal investigations?
I have, and I will say that yes, closer to Halloween, you can get more spirits communicating and making their presence known, but most of them I think are just people who just want to be acknowledged and are like, oh, hey, you can hear or see me. That's, wow, and are startled just as much as we are. Cause I mean, you can imagine if like you're a spirit in an office building and every day like 30 to 100 people are walking by, nobody acknowledges you. And then all of a sudden one acknowledges you, that you would be startled.
Yeah, yeah. But you've had experiences with a lot of spirits, right? Like, and it's mostly was it mostly overseas or here too?
I've had them here and overseas, but overseas, it's not as many spirits, and I think it's because of where I was and what was going on.
What do you think was going on, or what? Can you talk about it?
Sure. So, like the experience in Spain that I had was, so to give some backstory, the year before I had broken my leg and was on crutches. And we ended up going on a trip to Hawaii that December. This happened in August. And in November, I finally got the orthopedic to give me physical therapy and the okay to go on the trip. And so I was like, cool, I just got to get through physical therapy. So I get through the therapy and I board the cruise ship. And while in Maui, I went on what's called snuba, which is half scuba, half snorkeling. And so on the boat, I'm struggling to put the fins on because I can't really bend my leg too well yet. And this gentleman walks up to me, sits down, and he goes, here, let me help you. I got you. And then, of course, the host of the event or tour starts to give their spiel of the rules and everything. And all of a suddenly, the guy goes, now, if you've had any surgeries or anything in the past 6 months, you need to let us know because you'll be exempt from this activity because that's a health risk. And I must have had the look of shock on my face. And the guy looked over to me and goes, hey, stick with me. I got you. So I was like, all right, cool. So I got in the water doing our thing. And we get to the bay and we go submerge and we go to the bottom of the bay. And so I pick up in my hand dirt from the bottom of the bay and I'm like this and just watching it sit through my hand and feeling like how cool to be touching ground that probably hasn't been touched in hundreds or thousands of years. And I get back on the boat and I get back into my street shoes and we get back to the shore and I thank the gentleman and I never see him again after this. But when I get on the cruise ship, we start going to dinner and we realize I'm not walking with crutches anymore. It's like my leg just regenerated itself back to perfect condition. Everything was set before the accident. I was walking better than ever. And it was like, wow, it was such an amazing experience. And so the following year, we went on another cruise, and the orthopedic said, don't fall on your leg. Now comes the incident in Spain. It's raining. We get to the terminal, and I'm excited to go into town. Walking, I turn the corner, and there's a metal strip through the walk. Of course, it's wet from the rain. My foot hits it, slips, and my knee slams down on the ground. And I roll over and I am freaking out because it just happens to be the leg that I broke is the one that he hit. So I was like, oh my God, I just did what the doctor told me not to do. I felt it. This is not good. I get on to the ship. My parents help me back. And while I'm laying on the sofa, I hear a voice just out of nowhere saying, "Who are you?" And I'm like, "What do you mean? Who am I?" He goes, "Who are you?" And I go, "Well, I'm Michael Kopf." He goes, "No, who are you?" And I'm like, something inside me goes, "Oh, well, I'm a healer. I do Reiki work, and I want to help people." He goes, "Where are you?" And I'm like, "Well, I'm over water." And he goes, "What element heals you?" And I was like, "Water." "Oh, I'm over water." Next thing I know, I'm pulling the essence of the water surrounding my legs, surrounding my body. The pain goes away. Get back. Nothing's wrong. And I was studying paganism at the time. And I was talking with my teacher about this experience. And she was like, "You are one of my most unusual students because you having that kind of connection doesn't happen at the level you're at." So she was like impressed that I was able to pull in the elements to use it to heal. And I was like, yeah, and I was like, I never figured out, was that my subconscious talking to me, or was it a guide, or, a passing spirit that's like, hey, you need some help, let me help you. But that's where I say, it's not always was there somebody visible that I saw during the experiences.
That's interesting. So let me ask you this. When did is that kind of when you got into, it sounds like that's kind of when you started to realize that you were a healer, because I know you do healing as well. I know last time we talked, I know you do Reiki and I know you do Huna. We talked about that before, and you told me a story where you did like an amazing healing on a girl when her mother was there, and you kind of just like you laid your hands over her and you kind of did your thing. But like, so when did that all start coming into your reality, if you don't mind me asking?
See, that was already in my reality, but I think what it was is we're always taught when we learn like healing modalities or other things, they always say, just be, wary of doing it on yourself. Like energy work, a lot of people are like, don't do energy work on yourself. Let others do it because, you could theoretically open up a wound, internally, symbolically, and not realize it, leave it open, and then you're like, oh man, why am I feeling so drained? But I think it was them letting me know that I can heal myself. And so that's where the voice was saying to me, hey, you can heal yourself. Look at where you're at. And don't forget you are who you are.
That's interesting. Uh, That's interesting. So, back to your overseas stuff. Did anything else happen overseas that was kind of like paranormal or like really freaky or odd or that you remember?
So on another trip I went to Egypt, and it was over March, and we were going to a bunch of temples, and each temple I could feel energy in different places, and my friend William Henry was leading it. And come to find out, each of the temples we went to correlated to a specific chakra. So we started with the root, worked our way up to the crown. And when we got to the Great Pyramid, I was surprised to learn one, that there's 9 pyramids on Giza Plateau, we're always taught there's the three great pyramids, that's it, but there's actually nine.
That's
And
amazing. That's it. So it's like a complex. It's almost like, excuse me, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I was just gonna say, like, it's almost like the Mesoamerican complex as well, where most people think there's like Chichen Itza, but there's more than that. There's a whole Mayan complex. It's amazing. Like,
right,
I'm never ceased to amaze by like the world's megaliths and pyramids. I don't know. I have no clue how they got made. Like, it amazes me though. It's like it's fascinating.
it is. And the other thing too was at the foot of the pyramids is the Great Sphinx. It's like just a little bit below in front of the pyramids is the Great Sphinx, and there's a water line around the edge of the Sphinx. And so in front of it, where they show like the boat rings, and they say, well, these are rings to tie boats up to. And you're sitting there thinking, the Nile's nowhere near here. It always amazes me that they had the technology twice that they moved the Nile completely from its natural track to a new track to build the temple. And today it's like we look at moving a river and it's like a major undertaking. And I'm like, the Egyptians did it, no problem.
I wonder how they did it. That's amazing. Like, do we really think they were able to do it? Like, does it show signs of that, you think?
It does, because the Nile is like probably 5, 6 miles now from the site, and there's no traces of like, oh, the water's slowly been drying off. It's like it's dry. There's dry marks from where the water stained the rock and sand around the Sphinx all around it. And so it's like even the Sphinx was one point in the water, so to speak. And so it's like, yeah, there's definitely signs that a long time ago was water, but it ain't recent. And the fact that they did it a second time because they wanted to build a temple to the goddess Isis, I believe it was, in Philippi, and they had to move the Nile because the spot they wanted was under the Nile. So the Nile got shifted so they could build the temple there. And it's like how they maneuvered not only shifting it, but how they learned to shift it in a way that it won't go back, that it'll accept the new track. And that's the way it is today.
Can I ask you a question? How old do you think their history goes back there to Egypt? Like, I mean, do you think it's like thousands and thousands of years old?
Honestly, I think the history of Egypt, Sumeria, all of those, we're thinking thousands. I'm thinking it's more like 10, maybe hundreds of thousands years old.
Yeah.
It's like there's so many things around now that we're discovering that it's like there's no way that we could have periods of life on the earth, no life, life on the earth, no life, no life. Oh, hey, man shows up. I'm like, I don't buy that whole, the earth staying vacant for that long a period of time, because dinosaurs were, they like to say millions of years old, but man, I've seen evidence where there's footprints, human footprints next to a dino footprint in rock, and you can't tell me the rock softened up thousands of years later to allow the man's footprint to appear next to the dino's print and both are totally fine. It's like, no, doesn't work that way. They're either made at the same time or they're not.
Well, yeah, and that's like, like I've had Michael Cremo on my show. He does that forbidden archaeology. He thinks like here the world's history goes back, like you said, millions of years. Like he said that there's like like get different kinds of proof for it. It's really interesting when you start thinking about it, I mean, that's why, like, like it's like some people like to say only our history only goes back like 6,000 years. I'm like, I don't understand how that could be possible. That doesn't make any sense to me because like even like Göbekli Tepe, they say is like 12,000 years old, like,
Right.
and they're finding new sites and I know Matt LaCroix was doing some work recently where he was saying that the structures in Turkey are a lot older as well. So it's interesting. I don't know if we'll ever know. It's fascinating to me though. It really is. Like
It is, and the fact that, like you were pointing out, all these pyramid structures around the world, wherever we find them, they all seem to line up to a constellation. We didn't even know about constellations until, say, the 1700s when they started using telescopes and mapping the skies.
yeah,
And that was like a new discovery. And yet, the ancients who had no idea what a telescope is, as far as we know, didn't have that and could line up perfectly to it. The Nazca lines, I'm like, come on. We can only see them from an airplane, but yet they want us to believe, oh, farmer just happened to lay that out and it's just, happens to look like a monkey, which doesn't even exist in South America. But, and the spider, it's like, really? And the man with the helmet, it's like, yeah, because, everyone was walking around with helmets in the ancient days, looking like astronauts. It's like, come on, science, really?
yeah, it's interesting. Oh, one thing I wanted to get into was I don't know if you wanted to talk about this a little bit. Was you said that you are looking into your like memories of MK Ultra and SSP? Like, what have you got into? I mean, you could talk about it a little bit if you want. Like, I mean, like, or whatever. I know you're probably still discovering, but like, what made you think? I'll ask you this: like, what made you think that you had those memories in the first place? Did something kind of set you off that like? You know what I mean?
So I had my experience at two when I talked with my friend in Greece, Catherine Sorlos. She was telling me, oh, an entity pulled you in, but a second entity came and helped you, and that's the one who put you on the ground and prevented you from being hurt. And you have a level of protection around you that, you know, is rare. And so it started me thinking, okay, now there was two beings where I only thought of one. So my memory's been messed with. Or I just, with trauma, you block some stuff out. So I'm like unlocking pieces of it. And I would start to hear people like Tony Rodriguez and others who said, oh, when I was taking at a young age, and I was like, something inside me was like, you know what? Mine was at two, there was five, but this is resonating and feeling like something that I need to look into because this, there's something here because why am I resonating and all of a suddenly feeling like, could this have been what happened to me? And so then I started thinking about, well, maybe I should do a disclosure series on my podcast show. And I saw yours and loved it and thought it was well received. And so I thought, well, there's, people are interested in this, but I don't know who to reach out to. And so I had like three people, and I was like, I wanted to do two a month. And I was like waiting till I got everything settled. And then my dad ended up passing away in June. And I regretted that I couldn't start the series, because my goal was to help everyone. Pretty much, I believe, like your goal is. And in having the guests started talking, like Arkeem Rawood and Penny Bradley, Dr. Kimberly McGeorge, and a bunch of them, I started meeting people like Christy Campbell and talking with them and realizing my story feels like their story. And so I'm slowly starting to piece together that, okay, I feel like I've been in these programs. And as the guests come on, when we talk about the programs, it's like more and more starts to line up. And, we're not 100% in sync, but a lot of it we are. And the fact that we're not 100% in sync is what's driving me thinking, okay, this is real. Because if I was just, matching 100%, I could easily say, oh, well, I'm just, empathic, so I'm feeling what you're feeling, and that, I really wasn't in the program. But because I have unique experiences and memories that I wrote off as paranormal, then in talking with them, they were like, no, that, that's something you really did, and your memories are starting to bleed through. And I was like, okay, this is something that's caught my attention, so I want to see where it goes. So that's what writing through the unknown has turned into.
That's fascinating. And so do you feel like you've been in the secret space program on maybe like a 20-year and back or something?
I've been advised that I've been on a 20 and back, a 40 and back, and that it wasn't just once or twice, that it was like hundreds of times. And I said to her, I said, they said a 40 and back, I said, I'll be honest with you. I've never heard of a 40 and back. What is that? And she goes, well, you did your 20, you came back, but instead of bringing you back and placing you back in, they just put you back into the program again for another 20. So you did two 20 and backs back to back. And I was like, oh, wow. And it makes some sense too, because I've always had dreams and feelings of like running into people and being like, I know you, but I've never met you. And I know details, and it's like deja vu, where I've been in houses and I know where everything is in the house. And I'm like, yes, you could write it off as deja vu. But now I'm thinking it's because what they call alters in the programs, I'm thinking was there. And the memory bled in and was like, because I was there, triggered the memory. And I was like, okay, so this is over here, this is over here, this is over here. And it is freaky because I can go to places I've for the first time and be able to navigate it really well. Like when I was 6 and moved to Texas, my mom always thought it was because I had a good sense of direction, a natural keen like interest in direction. I would go on all the errands with her because no matter where she went, I could get us home. Now we're starting to think if it because I was in the programs, I was in the city as an alter. And so as a kid, I was tapping into memories of another lifetime where I was in the city, and that's how I knew how to get around a city I had never been to before, but instantly knew how to navigate.
That's interesting. That's so interesting. And then I was looking through your bio here while you were talking. You've had a lot of UFO experiences too. Maybe the UFO experiences tie in now to the SSP stuff, like because it says on your bio that you've had like 5 different UAP experiences. Do you think that now that like looking back on those that they might have tied into your SSP experiences?
I think so. And like you were asking, like how did I know I was in the programs? It was like watching movies like Stargate in the Stargate series.
Mhm.
I was like, there were moments where I was like, this is real. I remember this. And so I was told by a medium one time that I only watch shows that have a piece of something I need to learn to them. Like I just don't watch TV to watch TV. And so I was like, now looking at back and piecing together that she told me, stuff that I've seen, it's like this big picture's coming in. And whenever people would talk about alien races, I was always like, yeah, they're out there. They're not all bad. They're not all good, but they're out there. And it's like I had undeniable belief that there were aliens out there, there were crafts. And I was telling our team that I would draw pictures in my free time of like mountains, like a mountain, and inside the mountain would be like two levels, aircraft on one, aircraft on another level, like fighter jet looking craft, but there were no doors on the walls and or anything. And it always interests me that it would be like there could be three or four mountains, but only one would have like what looked like a base. And I was like, why am I drawing a base inside a mountain with no doors? How do people get in and out? And he looked at me and he goes, so there really are bases in mountains, and they use gates to travel to and from, or portals. So they don't need the doors. And so you were seeing you were drawing a memory of something you saw in another life. And it's like, yeah, and so looking back, it's like I'm piecing that it's always been there, but unless somebody triggers you by saying, oh, this happened to me and experienced this, and this, that you start looking at it and going, wait a minute, what if this that they're talking about happened to me? And one of the other key pieces was they always say the kids in the programs, well, not always, but most of them have keys to military. My dad was in the Navy, so I have the military connection. And this life, I was, my parents were like, no way, we're not putting you through the military. It's not what they say it is. This isn't the military is not what is as advertised. I know from experience. So I was like, all right, I trust you. And now we kind of laugh because we're like, I was actually not allowed to go to the nicer military. Instead, I went to the harsher military. And so we kind of laughed, going, well, that kind of backfired on us. But it is an experience to where, one, you have to trust your discernment, you have to trust yourself, and you have to trust what people are telling you and going, okay, does this resonate with me? Yes. Okay. So maybe there's some truth to this. Let's dig deeper. And if something they say doesn't, and to be like, okay, that's their story. That's great, that they, had that recall, that experience. I don't have that. I'm not going to make believe I have it and let it go and focus on what does, because these programs are so vast that you could get lost in them and you could easily start to go, oh, I feel like, I had this memory, so I must be a Delta because somebody said, oh, as a Delta, you're trained to do this. Well, just because they're trained to do it and you have a memory of doing it doesn't make you a Delta. So that's why I say it's a journey of learning what resonates and what doesn't, because there's so many stories with so many different people that you can easily get swallowed up in the story and get lost.
Yeah. I'm trying to think of what else I wanted to ask you about. Oh, so can you talk about some of your UFO experiences? What did you see? Like, what kind of craft did you witness?
So one of my favorite was, I had just got done with work and I was putting stuff away and I looked off into the sunset and I saw what looked like a square with a tail sticking up, and I was like, I think that's a UFO. And I couldn't hear it. Yes, I was right by a highway, and at night there are a lot of cars going by 75, 80 miles an hour, but you can still hear a plane. And I was like, I never heard it, and something inside me said, look up. And I was like, okay. So I seen it, I acknowledged it and thought nothing of it. Like, thank you. I go, put everything away, check out from where I was doing my work procedure, and I look up again and it's still there. So I took photos and I sent, I posted them on Facebook and I was like, hey, what do you guys think this is? I witnessed this for like 5, 10 minutes and it never moved. It was always in the same location. Planes can hover, helicopters can, but there's no rotors on it. And so one of my friends were like, "Oh, it's probably just a plane that was moving really slow in its flight path. You should check with the FAA." And I was like, "Well, we don't have silent planes that would just be out willy-nilly over, you know, populated areas. The stealth fighters don't just hang out. And they're always in groups. We never have just one stealth bomber around somewhere. There's always like three or four, from what I understood. And the more I looked at it and the more I zoomed in, it didn't have any shape of a known plane that I had. And so I was like, that was one of the only ones that I took photos of. And after people were like, oh, I don't think, this is this or this is that, I was like, you know what? It's my experience. I'll just keep them to myself now. And I'll tell you, but I just won't photograph. Now, the other experience that I can share, the last one I had, I went and got my mom to look at, because so there were clouds in the sky and there were bright flashes of red light on one side, bright flashes of yellow on the other side, and occasionally they would mix. And when I looked up at it, something inside me said, this is a battle in space. We're seeing impact flashes because ball lightning doesn't change colors. It's either one or the other, from my understanding of science. I can't hear these, and it's only behind one cloud. And the cloud was a white cloud, not a dark cloud, like a storm cloud. And so I was like, and it was over where my house was at. And so we were watching it, and it literally looked like, if you were to take, like, say, Star Trek, when you see like a Federation ship fighting a Romulan or Klingon ship, how they had those bursts of red or green depending on the phasers. Well, that's what it looked like to me. It was like, I'm seeing impacts. And we went back inside and I was like, I'm willing to bet nobody else has seen this, because there's no sound to make you look up to go, hey, what's going on up there? And it just, why would I have the feeling of battle?
Yeah. That's interesting. Like, well, I've had Dr. Courtney Brown on my show, and he says that like you can see all the UFOs up there. You just need like an infrared camera, and then it's like you slow down the speed, and you can take pictures. He said it's like Star Wars up there. So people, I think people agree with you that like a lot's going up in our sky that we can't even notice or see. Like on a daily basis. It's strange.
It is, and the same teacher that told me about, or medium that told me about, everything that was going on as a kid. My parents tell me the story of a group of people were sitting around her and asked her, how come we don't have disclosure? How come, UFOs are being kept secret? And she said, and I love her answer. Her answer was simply this: take a group of 30 people, 15 who are believers, 15 who are not believers. Walk outside. Hovering over the parking lot is a giant UFO. The 15 believers see it and are like in awe. The other 15 are looking at you like you guys are nuts, just looking at the sky and saying how beautiful the sky is because it's the same sky all the time. And someone said, well, why can't the 15 non believers see the UFO? And they said, because their mind filters it out. Because they don't believe in it, their mind will make it disappear. That's how powerful our minds are. So when we, are saying, like we have fleets of ships in our skies above us, if your mind is open to the idea of fleets of ships above us, I agree with Courtney. You probably can see them and we like get great evidence of it. But those who are like, no, there's no UFOs above us because it would look like this or this or this. You could show them all the pictures in the world and they'll never believe it because their mind won't accept it.
Yeah, yeah. We have a couple minutes left. Is there anything else you wanted to cover before we finish up for today, or we still, it's up to you.
Um, I just would like to encourage people to, if you're interested in the disclosure and you're wanting to dip your toe in it, watch typical skeptical podcast. Watch Writing Through the Unknown. My friend Andy Decodes has some on his show. So be open to what's out there and don't hide behind your beliefs. Challenge your beliefs. And so if you feel like, there's everything we're saying is a lie, that's fine. I'm not here to prove anything to you. I know, Robert, you're not here to prove anything to anyone. And so if you don't like the information, pick a different episode. Or if you find an episode and you're like, hey, there's something to this, dig deeper in it. Don't just accept what people tell you. Do your own due diligence and do your own homework.
I agree. I couldn't agree more. I was just gonna say, you're still doing your show, right? Can you tell everybody where they can find your show and stuff?
Sure, I have The Energy That Surrounds Us on Tuesday nights. It's on Paralinks One, Paranormal United Network. It's on my YouTube channel. It's on its own YouTube channel, The Energy That Surrounds Us. The show page for it, I believe, is called Spirit for Two, is the Facebook page. If you look it up that way, or if you look up The Energy That Surrounds Us, it'll pull up the Facebook page. On every other Thursday, I do Paranormal Verses with Kel Ridley in the UK. And so we have some topics on different paranormal, including UFOs. We recently had Colin Sanders on, and we've had a friend of Walton with the Fire in the Sky. We had Mike Heston Rogers on, and so we sort of dip our toe a little bit on that show. And Riding Through the Unknown is umbrellaed under the energy that surrounds us. And you can find it on Facebook. Riding Through the Unknown, it has its own page. It's under the energy that surrounds us, or my personal YouTube page right now, because YouTube is limiting how many channels I can have because it's 2 per phone number. And so I'm trying to figure out a way to wiggle around that.
Oh,
But those are where you can find my shows.
yeah, I was thinking about starting a new channel myself, like just a backup channel. But then I've been just trying to build my Rumble too. Because like, because I cover more controversial stuff. I figure I can just put it on my Rumble channel. Like, I don't know. I don't know. It's like it's hard to say. Like
Do you get my traction on Rumble?
yeah, yeah, I do. Yeah. Yeah. I took a while, but like, like when I get a good guest, like it gets like over 1,000 views and I only have like 800 subscribers on Rumble. So, like it's like it shows me that I'm being shadow banned on YouTube or that, like, because my videos get more views on YouTube, but the initial views are like, like I have one video on Rumble that has like 1,500 views right now, and I just recorded it a week ago. So it's like, it's not bad. It's not amazing or anything, but it's like, it's worth it for me to put, the controversial stuff on there because then I know it'll get seen. You know what I mean? Whereas I wasn't sure before, but I'm on Rockfin too, but I almost stopped posting on there because I don't know, it wasn't worth it. They're just like, I don't know. It was I wasn't I don't know what happened. It was weird. And then I do audio too. Audio is always good to have all your stuff on audio. You know what I
Right.
mean? Like um but yeah, but thanks, Michael. And we still have 2 shows scheduled. Like you're gonna come back on here, yeah, I think you're scheduled to come back on here, and then I'm gonna come on your show, or I can't remember. I have it on my
Um,
calendar.
I know you're scheduled to come back on November 21st. Well, actually, I say come back on, but come on to the energy that surrounds us on November 21st at 9 o'clock Central
Oh,
Time.
okay, maybe that's what it was. Yeah, I know I have it written down. So yeah.
Yeah, but I'm happy to come on anytime you need a guest. I'm happy to come on and share where I'm at and what's going on. It's always a pleasure.
Yeah, it's awesome, man. Well, all right. Well, have a good night and happy Halloween, and I'll talk to you soon, man. Have a good night.
You too. Happy Halloween.
All right, take care.